Hello, welcome to the Hope, Health, and Healing podcast. I am Michelle Hannah Fields, and I am your host for episode 7, where we chat with my friend Anne Wooten. She has a remarkable story of faith, just how her faith has carried her through, and really has been on a healing journey the last few years. She is a blogger, she is a musician, and a songwriter, and a singer. She is a poet. She has just published her first book. It's a book of her poetry, and she's also a freedom coach. In this podcast, we learn a little more about Anne and what it looks like to take a walk with the Lord that results in freedom. So sit back with your favorite cup of coffee and let's chat with Anne. Well, tonight I have as my special guest Anne Wooten. She is a friend of mine that I met at She Speaks conference last July in Charlotte. And it's just been a joy watching her journey over these last, 9 months that I've watched her and just listened to or read her blog that she has. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well so that you can check her out. But I just wanted to catch up with Anne, see what's going on in her life, and have her share her story with us. So, Anne, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Well, tell me a little bit about you. Like, who is Anne?
Anne is someone that, number one, God first, always. But I retired accountant, and I was saved when I was 12 years old. And I was raised in Lexington, North Carolina, which is about an hour, I would say, north from where I live now in Concord. And I was raised with my parents. Both of them were accountants. And I have an older brother that lives in Huntsville, Alabama. And he is a retired electrical engineer. So there's the accounting, it was in my blood, I worked, I guess, in about 50 years because I started working for my father in his small office when I was 13.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was and he did the income taxes. But when I started out on my own, I never got into the income taxes. It was enough to do my own.
Yeah. I will say I have an accounting degree, and tax accounting is what kept me from being an accountant.
Yeah, and it took me in other areas of accounting, mostly, really my specialty was like in the construction or property management side. That's what I did for the latter part of, the years before I retired last year.
Yeah.
But basically through the years, I mean, it was the accounting, I mean, the faith was always there. It would just, it's like anybody, you grow. I think because when I was 12, I really didn't fully grasp, I think, the entire what it meant. But as you grow, you mature spiritually, and God will he's going to take you, on the path that is right for you. Not the path maybe necessarily you want, but
Right. Yeah.
it's going to be in his timing always.
Yeah.
But
How did you see him in that career? Did you see him like guiding your steps in that career?
yeah, he sure did, because there was one time I was let go, from a company, and it was when I was laid off. They just I was what they called a bookkeeper then, and they just there was 12 of us within within the system, and they let all 12 of us go because they just reorganized. And but you got a severance package. On the day that severance package was to end, there was the new job that I started. Like, it ended on a Friday. I started the new job on that Monday.
Wow.
Or, so it's been things like that, it's like when the money or the things would run out, God was always right there to provide. And you always sensed when there was be a change coming. And every time I would sense that, he would always answer with the new job. And it was the same thing till I retired.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, just seeing him guide your steps like that, it builds your faith.
It
You
does.
Yeah, just helps you see, like, he goes, it's like the scripture, it says he goes before us. He
Mm-hmm.
prepares the way and he's leading us. There's a scripture in Isaiah that says you'll hear a voice behind you saying, take this, go to the left here and go to the right here. The voice behind you will direct you. So I love that, he
Mm-hmm.
met you there every step of the way and just led you and guided you through that. How do you feel like God has really just moved in your life in the last couple of years? I know in talking with you, like your position in life has changed a little bit. He's done that with me as well, just taken me down a completely different path than what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know that he was leading you in a different path?
I really never got a sense of it until, a couple of years ago when we were talking, I joined, that special community, and I had no idea why. Um, but didn't feel lost. I was beginning to come back, but it was right after the COVID lockdowns and all that, and things were beginning to open back up. But sometimes you just feel that intuition. It's that kind of gut feeling. And the longer you ignore it, it gets stronger
Mhm.
and stronger till you can't deny it any longer. So it was kind of like that. I had experienced it maybe once or twice before. And so God just said, yes, I want to take you on that path. I
Mhm.
want you to join that community.
Mhm.
And that is what opened me up to writing,
Mhm.
to songwriting,
Mhm.
to really, it was to better myself health wise
Mhm.
because I was pre-diabetic.
Mhm.
Um, and I started, taking better care. I started appreciating myself the way that God thought I was worthy because
Yeah.
he created us. We're his handiwork.
Yeah.
Ephesians 2:10 says that.
Yeah.
And it's like I just started trusting that. My faith started getting stronger. And I think in the past, before when I was trying to lose weight, then I think I didn't have that strong of faith.
Mhm.
And without that, it just was not going to happen. Now I did this first for that. But
Mhm.
no, God said introduced writing. And then in June of 2022 is when I started the blog because it was between that or something else. And I was just brushing my teeth one morning, one day at a time came up. And
Mhm.
that's when I knew to start that. And then
Yeah.
in August of that year, I was introduced to poetry.
Mhm.
And I hated I'll be honest with you. Growing up, the only thing I could do really with English was edit or do grammar pretty well because I was detail oriented being in accounting.
Mhm.
There was no creativity. I despised it.
Yeah.
But God said, nope.
Yeah. And I,
So,
I was the same way, when you say that about English, I could diagram sentences and I could proofread and
mhm.
I could edit, but you asked me to write something and it was like you were telling me to jump off of a 20-story building. Like that was not. And I can remember in school having my brother help me with my assignments where I had to write because he was so good at it. And that was not what I was good at. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. When God says, I want you to write, you're like, you want me to do what? You know?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, now, because I was good at math when you like add, subtract, multiply, and divide. But
Mhm.
now I have a minor in computer science when I was
Mhm.
at school, but I never did really use that, but I knew it was good to have.
Yeah.
But it was like anything beyond that, I had to take calculus in college,
Mhm.
and it was like I just could not understand. It was beyond my comprehension. But now my brother, being an electrical engineer, he tried to explain it to me. It was a
Yeah.
lost cause. But the good thing is I could memorize. So it's like I did really good, pretty well on the exam, and
Yeah.
that's what they took for my
Yeah.
grades. So it's like I just memorized, and that's
Yeah.
still to this day can't understand it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That's tough stuff. Well, let's go back to just kind of like what led you to um begin where you said that you felt like God was helping you to appreciate yourself. Like where do you feel like things shifted for you in life? Because we all have those battles, and
mhm.
where we will look in the mirror and say things to ourselves we wouldn't say to anybody else. And, I know a lot of us struggle with that. What did that look like in your life that, that you feel like God has helped you to begin that healing process through?
Actually, it began in late 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 2019, for some reason, I never really went into full depression,
Mm-hmm.
but I just kind of stopped going to church.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't stop. I stopped praying and reading the Bible, but I never did totally lose. We never lose our faith because once you're saved, you're always saved. But it just wasn't where it was should be, and I was just concentrating on me instead of God.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think God was trying to grab my attention on starting to face what has been going plagued me through my life because I would go in and out of it. I mean, for a long time I would be okay with my faith, and then sometimes you would go to have those lulls. But I think I just kind of like I've learned when now it's just like sometimes you just put that in the back of your head and say, you know, I'll deal with it later or something like that, procrastinate type thing. But he was not letting that go in 2019. And I started somehow understanding why I was feeling the way I was feeling. Because for myself, now that I've, you know, 4 or 5 years later, I've learned so much. And it's like you have to really grasp the root of those anxieties and those fears.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, and I think I was trying to always walk around it and just trying to skim over the top, saying, "Hey, I'm okay."
Yeah.
But he was, God was saying, no, you're going to have to face these things and understand where, and he, little by little, nobody, I didn't have a coach, nobody, he was my coach, God. But he started, I guess something in my mind was just triggering. I started going back to my childhood. And my family is just the way they were raised. My parents just never verbally would say, and you did a good job, or they love you. It was the way they raised. It was not because they didn't love me. They
Mm-hmm.
were, I call it, I think a safe word to say is distant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of had resentments, regrets that I didn't say something, but I never felt I was good enough. And then I started placing expectations on myself, on my friends, on others, and I would try to be a people pleaser. And that is going to catch up with you over the years. And it catched up with me when I was trying to get a little bit unhealthy before, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So 2019, I faced the first part of that. I had to go through three separate things. And that was with, I thought it was going to be with both of my parents. It ended up, the first one was with just having to deal with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And she was deceased then, so there was nothing I could say
Mm-hmm.
to her. But it's like I had to go through, and I call it kind of a triangle of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to either forgive that person that you feel like hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And with her, I couldn't have a conversation. So I had to do it inwardly and say, I forgive you. But I actually did this standing over their graves.
Oh wow.
one day. I felt like that's what God wanted me to do. On the way there, there was a rainbow in the direction that I was going.
Wow.
And so I did. I actually stood up there and asked to be, I've told God that I said, I forgive my mother. And then I had to ask God to forgive me for the resentments I had,
Mm,
which is the second part. The last one is the hardest when
mm,
we have to let go of it and ask God to help us forgive ourselves so we can get rid of the guilt and
mhm.
the shame to live in freedom.
Yeah.
Of course, I thought that was the only one, but I will tell you that day, God knows that we all love to see something tangible, like physical. But I drove back home about 3 hours later, and as I was coming into the subdivision, I kid you not, there it was a rainbow over the entire subdivision.
Wow. Yeah.
That's when I knew that one was. So I thought everything was hunky dory, but no, a couple of years later, I mean, things started was be okay. I was growing. I was beginning to get back involved with church and everything. But then a couple of years ago, I joined the community, and that's when the love for writing came.
Mhm,
And that's when my faith really started to take hold. And I
mm,
was beginning to get bold because I was praying for that.
mhm,
And it's just like the writing, the faith came together, starting the blog, writing the poetry. All of it came through this community of support that I didn't have anywhere else.
yeah.
And that's when I started beginning to feel, yes, God says we are worthy because He loves us. He created us in His own image and
Mhm.
before we were even born.
Yeah.
And so He just revealed things. Of course, I never knew 2 years ago why I was led there on this journey.
Mhm,
But today, you look back, it's the same thing. I will say, before my mother passed, it was one of the harder times in the life. I was her caregiver for about 3.5 years before she died in '08. And there were two prayers that I always prayed. I wanted to hear her verbally say, or that I could remember hearing her say, as she loved me, and just to really know she was saved.
mhm.
And I was 48 when she passed, but it was like about a month before she passed, both of those prayers were answered within
Yeah.
1 week.
Wow.
But
That,
hearing her say I love you was good, but knowing she was saved was much better.
yeah, for sure.
And that and my mother and my relationship grew during those years. It was really grueling. It was really, but I can also understand what it might have felt a little bit raising a child.
Mhm,
There were more good than bad,
mhm.
but it was a struggle, but God's there with you, but through all thick and thin.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and being a caregiver like that for somebody is such hard work. But it's also rewarding because it gives you special memories, um,
mhm,
that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And so, it is a blessing. It's hard when you're in the middle of it, but when
oh
you can
yes,
look back, and you can see the blessings inside of it, and what you gain through that, you can God has a way of blessing the hard times like that, and giving you something to hold
yeah,
to.
and even it's like when I stood over their gravesite, and I had to do that in 2019 to let it go of my mother. It's like in October of 2022, I went back and did the same thing with my dad.
Mm,
I in my head, I kind of understood why he was not, with the family circumstances. And all of this was self-manipulated by me, not anybody else.
mhm,
But when I was looking up in the sky, I'm a really one that just loves to watch the sky, the clouds and everything. But I looked up, and typically there's not any planes that go over
mhm,
or at least when I'm there, which is not very often. But the jet fuel that propels, there's like two of them were going in one direction and there was another one coming this way. And I just thought that would be my parents and God coming right in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it was like, but that was another one. And it's like after when I was writing and thinking about writing the music, there was a song that I wrote for my mother called Good Night, Sweet Mom. And then there was another one for my dad. Then I can remember as he was dying, it's called Daddy's Eyes. And
Oh.
it's like, but I had to do a third one, and it was, just some inward stuff with another, with someone about somebody. And it's just like, and that was done at Christmas
Mhm.
this year, but it's like three instances, but you've grown through each one of them. I feel like I understand why. And I finally, when you walk through them as plainly as they are, God uses those experiences, what you've gone through, to pay it forward to somebody else. It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
think that's why now I'm to the freedom coach, because you have to walk through the fear, I call it, some people call it unforgiveness. I
Mhm.
call it broken forgiveness. I like the word broken a little better. And then you walk in freedom.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I love that.
you will still have fear,
Mhm.
because that's just something of the norm.
Mhm.
But it's like you don't stay in that state as long.
Right.
You recognize it.
Yeah, yeah. And courage is not the absence of fear.
Yeah.
Courage is walking through, with fear right there with you, but
Mhm.
battling through it. You're using what God gives you. He says, be strong and courageous. And so he wouldn't tell you to be courageous if there wasn't going to be any fear.
Mm-mm.
You wouldn't
Yep.
need courage, if you weren't going to walk through something with fear, with attacking you and being there, then you wouldn't need courage to get through it.
Yeah, and his grace is sufficient. Second
Mhm.
Corinthians 12:9, his grace is sufficient, and he will, through that weakness, he gives us the strength
Mhm.
to walk us through it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love what you said, broken forgiveness. I love that imagery, because it is, it's a broken bond there.
Mhm.
And we can be so broken because of harboring, bitterness and unforgiveness in our hearts. And then when we do give that forgiveness, when we offer that up,
Mhm.
whether the person is standing there physically in front of you or if they've gone on to be with the Lord, like your parents, when you give that forgiveness, then it does start that healing process. And, God restores the broken places. And so I love that you call it broken forgiveness. That's such a great.
Yeah, I liked that. I went through Anne Bonskap's Bible study, The Broken Way, on my own. And that term just came, it's like unforgiveness, it's just the part of it. I'm like, what is something a little bit more positive? Because broken is can be fear too. It's like, but I like broken forgiveness, and it was just there. So if I didn't get anything else out, I did. I got a lot more
Yeah.
out of that
Yeah.
one, but it's like that term just came for part of the program.
That's awesome. Let's talk about your freedom coaching because I know that's something new for you.
Hmm.
How, and I know you've talked a little bit about how that came about, but how do you feel like God is leading you in that direction, and what do you kind of envision there?
Well, it's really it's it's all kind of not a blur right now, but it's like what I envision for a typical client is just helping them. Number one, I want to determine, I've got to get where their heart is. I
Mhm.
need to understand if they are saved or not.
Mhm.
Because if they're not, we're going to stop right there.
Mhm.
And if they want to go forward, I need to find out. That's just kind of gears me, I think, for myself, how, because one of my spiritual gifts is evangelism. And I think that is where I took EE, Evangelism Explosion, a long time ago. And I think to incorporate that in there. So, um,
And
so
true freedom will only be found in Christ anyway.
that's true. That is. And it's like before we talk about the fears and everything, let's find out where your faith is and what you say that is. Because if I want to get that person saved, if I want God to use me, and if they're not saved, that's where I figure we need to begin, because that could be the root of it right there.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of going from that, and then we talk about the fear, and it's like, face your fear is no. We have to walk through the fear. We have to acknowledge it. We have to grasp it. We have to understand what it is. We need to get to the root of that fear. And it's not easy. It's painful, but if they make the choice to go through it, then I've been through it, you've been probably through it, and it's like there is benefits on the end, but it's just messy disorientation to go through it. And that's probably the part where you get into that broken forgiveness. That's going to be acknowledging the faith aspect coming into it. It's like you need to hear the voice of God. You're understanding that. So you go through that, you go through to see if it's, like I had to go through, you have to go through if there's forgiveness, forgiving whomever, or if it's just yourself, whatever. And then you go through asking God to forgive you, but then you've got to walk through the process of when you let go, you never forget, because it's always going to be a part of you, but it doesn't have to take over your life.
Yeah.
And it's just that last one hurdle is the hardest, because our sinful pride wants us to hold on. We think we've got to hold on to something, but we don't.
Yeah.
But we need to let that go and get rid of the guilt, get rid of the shame, and ask God to help for us to get rid of the guilt and help us to forgive ourselves.
Yeah, I think that really is we are the hardest person to forgive, because the enemy likes to come back. I had a friend of mine she preached on grace one time, and what she said just was such a good visual for me. She said, we all have the closet of our past. And things we've done, things we've walked through, it's all in there. And the enemy likes to grab our hand and take us back in that closet and show us things. And things that God has forgiven us for, all those things are under the blood. But he likes to go open the door of the closet and take us, and he'll come out for show and tell. He's like, hey, don't you remember this, And
Yeah.
we have to forgive ourselves, and he likes to remind us of those things. But then we have to remember, like, we're not guilty of those things anymore. Like, Christ forgave us of that. And then, what she said was, when the enemy brings that back and he wants to show you something in the closet of your past, you show him the cross. And you're like, no, like, I'm not guilty of that anymore, And but going through that, if you don't go through that process of asking God to help you forgive yourself, then when the enemy comes and shows you those things, it's going to take you back down into that hole, you know.
Yep.
So you have to do that holy work. And I know we talked before we got on here, and I said, that's the work that I don't really like to do. I don't like to sit with myself and see those things, but I know that in order for me to grow and become who God wants me to become, I've got to get rid of those things that are holding me back, and really recognize those things and walk in that surrender. So, I think that is, and what you're doing, I think that's so good, first and foremost, pointing them to Christ, and getting that relationship right.
Mm-hmm.
And then allowing them to see that, walking through that forgiveness, like you said, that fear a lot of times is rooted in that, things that
Yeah.
we've gone through and things we've held to, things that we kind of believed about ourselves and somebody else reinforced, and then
Mm-hmm.
it keeps coming back with that thing. And
Mm-hmm.
we partnered with that, but that's not who God called us to
Right.
be, and that's not what God said.
Yeah. And if you think about what I've also read is like, and I really like this statement. It's a really, what we fear, we obey.
Wow.
And if you think about it, there's two kinds of fear.
Mhm.
There's the healthy and the unhealthy. Well, the healthy, of course, is to fear God. And if we keep that in mind, that keeps our focus correct because we are such in awe of Him. We revere Him,
Right.
we respect Him. And that's the healthy part. And so we'll obey that, we'll submit and willingly obey.
Mhm.
But if we keep, that other fear, that's what we're going to obey. And that takes us away from God. So that statement holds a lot of water, holds a lot of truth.
Yeah, for sure. That it does, that's so good. Now, one of the other things that you said you started doing is, let's talk about your music. What inspired you to start writing songs and learning the guitar?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I took piano when I was young, and that was something my mother wanted me to take. But I can go back and remember I've always had this thing for the acoustic guitar, not electric, but
Mhm.
it's just the sound of the acoustic is so I don't know, it's just so clear. I don't know. There's just or majestic or something, soothing. I think that's a better word for it. Um, but I never did pick it up. I just kind of tabled it and did what mom wanted me to do, stuck with it, mute piano. And I was been in choirs ever since I was about 6 years old. So I've been in choir off and on for all my life. So there was the love for that music. But I guess this time that everything started changing in like 2022, where I joined the community and I started, you know, writing and I started opening myself up a lot more through my friend Don McLeod, who's a Canadian singer songwriter. And for some reason, I just decided get buy one. And I did take some guitar lessons, but after a while it was conflicting with my work schedule. So I said, well, that's okay. I will just, you know, kind of teach myself. And it's been slow, but that's okay. Um, but I guess as I was walking on this journey, God just said, when you hear it, kind of like I always hear, most of mine is when I have a quiet time in the mornings. Right after then, that's my best time of writing, whether it's a song, poem, or something for the blog or whatever. And it was part of the healing and growing. I was having some of within those couple of years, there were good days, there were not so good. You were wanting clarity, confirmation, because so many things were changing.
Mhm.
And every time I went through some kind of change, boom, I would write a song about it. And it's just the love for music and the love of the sound of that instrument.
Mhm.
I can't do that with the piano, but
Mhm.
I can do it with a guitar. The lyrics usually come first for me, and then the melody comes, and then I just what chords I can play. You be with that guitar is one of the most creative instruments there is. And you can write a song with, I think the Beatles did one with two chords one time. I think it was called Yellow Submarine, but I might be wrong on that.
Uh-huh.
But, I don't know a whole diversification of, chords yet, but what I've done, and I've been writing it just as it's also been a healing process. So
Mhm.
it's been, and I decided instead of just putting them on the blog,
Mhm.
I decided, and you need to get this stuff out and open yourself up on social media.
Mhm.
My singing voice, I'm like, are you kidding? It's like, do it. I can remember the first time the recording it's no big deal,
Uh-huh.
but it's like when you hit that publish button, afterwards, my hand was just like shaking just like that. It's kind of like the after effect. And it's like, but after you do it one time and everybody seemed to, most people liked it, then you just kept sharing.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah,
that
we
first time.
yeah, we think, we make up these stories in our head of what everybody's
Hmm.
gonna think. And, I think sometimes that's just the enemy trying to keep us from pushing that button, because it will inspire people, it will encourage people. And I love that you were brave and you put it out there.
And most of the time, when God is preparing you for something, you're wanting to say no to it. And He is wanting, when you've got that little bit of that anxious feeling or anxiety, you're not very, but God is saying that is when you have to take the leap of faith and
Mhm.
say yes
Yeah.
and just pray that you are hearing. But like
Mhm.
every time I would do something, it would always be that nudge
Mhm.
almost near the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You feel that little palpitation.
Mhm.
You know, for sure. And you know that that's God. And when he won't leave you alone about it, you know.
Oh, and it
He's
gets
gone.
worse and it gets stronger and stronger. And it's just like, okay, I get it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna let's go. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. Now let's talk about and we've kind of jumped around a little bit, but you had your own coach that really helped you too with processing some things and getting some clarity. So talk about that a little bit, like what it's been like for you to work with a coach and how you think that has really kind of confirmed some things for you and led you, to step out in some new areas.
Well, it was more or less, I felt like if I was going to help someone, it's like when I took the writing course, I learned what the total entrepreneurship of being a writer is. And
Mhm.
a lot of, podcasters or, they're speakers and they're even coaches.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, I thought it's like since I retired, it's like I had the time I needed to understand more what the coaching really was,
Mhm.
whether or not God really wanted me to go into it. I think I needed to check to see what it was. So I took and the coach that I had, my cousin sent me, something through Facebook Messenger. She didn't know why. It took several days, so I clicked on it, and then it was a coach, and I'm like, wow, God interworks just like that goes kind of. And so I took a free strategy call with her, and it took me about a month or so because I was praying whether this is God, what God wanted me to invest the time, the money, the energy, whatever. But I felt like if God wanted me to do this, then I needed to be trained. I needed to know because I've always been one that has been behind, with an accountant, sit at the desk. You don't converse with a lot of people. And I've never been one, more of an introvert, asking questions. I would, if somebody asked me questions, yeah, I could talk. But I I knew I needed to be on the other side where I would be the ones asking the questions. So
Mhm.
I knew I needed to be trained and to learn what questions to ask. And I think also God was saying, I want to open you up to another community.
Mhm.
And of course, I would not do it if it was not faith-based, and she was.
Mhm.
And her faith is like you get 10 or 15 of us on one of the huddle calls where we support one another in this community, and you get the faith of just one of her, and you get about 10 or 15 of us. I'm like, it
Yeah.
is just, it is awesome.
Mhm.
And but the learning of what to do, and she's very good at it. I've never, you know, it's the first time I've been around a coach, and it's like, but I learned a lot. I know what I can put, what I've learned into helping others, because she helped me to define what what I would be. And she's like, usually she said coaches are those whom have gone through an experience, and they're those kind of coaches so they can help people
Mhm.
because you know about that area.
Mhm.
You've been through it. You
Right.
can, and you can use your experience to specialize in that one area to help others.
Mhm.
And so I I took that, and it's like, and then all of a sudden it just opened me up a little even more so in my faith,
Mhm.
just because you're in another community like that. And it's just like, and she will challenge you, but in a good way, because that's what coaching is. We kind of we challenge, but hold people accountable.
Right.
We don't figure out the problem for them because
Mhm.
they have to do the work. We just ask the questions to hopefully get them there. And it's like, that is different because I want to be the one that's like, make it all better for somebody. But it's like, no, I have to kind of stand back and just let them think the process, because everybody is unique. And I am learning that as I start out with my first beta client soon. And I'm excited because I'm going to be learning just as much, hopefully, as she is.
Yeah.
And that's really what I want people to discover is being called a freedom coach. I want them to experience the life of, yes, we can't escape fear in life. It's gonna always plague us, but how we react to it, and how we don't stay down in the the dirt, down in the dirt or in that hole that
Mhm.
long. We shouldn't have to stay there that long. Yes, we will probably go there, but we need to pick ourselves up with God, putting the focus back on Him. But once we get to that freedom stage, I want to help people discover, if they don't know what their spiritual gifts are, because 9 times out of 10, I know that mine changed drastically when I walked through the fears that I had to walk through.
Mhm.
They changed from just being a giver to me shepherding and evangelism and teaching.
Mhm.
And that's a total 180 for me. And I want to help people discover that, or maybe they'll under they'll undergo and have an undiscovered talent. But I want to show and make sure that they can use them to
Mhm.
further God's kingdom, to equip others, and so it'll be a ripple effect.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm in for it, not for money, but because if somebody needs help and they
Mhm.
can't pay or something, I'm going to take them on as a client because I am called unapologetically faith-based to help others. I know that now more than I have known probably in my life,
Yeah.
what my last days are, for at least for right now. That's
Mhm.
what I feel like God's calling me to do.
That's so awesome. And kind of what you were talking about, we're all going to go through those times. I'm a coach as well, just in a different area. And one of my coaching leaders, she said, we're all going to get in the ditch at some point.
Mhm.
But I'm not going to crawl in the ditch and help you decorate it.
Mm,
And so, when you get in the ditch, my job is to help you get out of the ditch so that
Yeah.
you're not staying there, and that's exactly what you're talking about. We're all gonna go through seasons and times when we find ourselves, for every 1 mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditches.
Yep.
And so we're gonna wind up being in one at some point. But the trick is, like you said, to find your way out of there quicker. And I think having a coach and having somebody you're accountable to, not just that you're holding them, accountable really to themselves. You're just
Hmm.
reminding them of why they're on this journey and what they're looking to accomplish. And you're just there as a positive voice to help guide them out of that ditch when they get in there.
Yeah.
I
And
love it.
some people need that, sometimes I wish that I had had it myself going through what I did, but there was a reason, there was a purpose,
Mhm.
and it's okay, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I've said for years, like, we don't understand sometimes why we walk through the things we walk through.
Hmm.
But a lot of, I say so sometimes it's for us to learn something about ourselves. Sometimes it's for us to learn something about God. And sometimes it's because God knows we can walk through it with our faith intact and we'll be a light to somebody else who's not as strong.
Yeah,
And so, mhm,
yeah, instead of asking, I've always said, I've heard, instead of asking why,
mhm,
asking, what am I to learn about this? What are
exactly.
you teaching me?
Yeah, yeah,
That's the positive part of it. Because
yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think, like you said, just looking at it from that perspective, like, what can I learn? How can I, what are you teaching me through this? And how can I help somebody else? I love that. That's so good. All right. So now I want to talk about something exciting that's happening. So you have your blog, and
mhm.
that is just such an encouraging thing. What has that meant to you? We'll get to the exciting part in a minute, but I want to go back to your blog. What has that meant to you to have people that are reading your blog, and I know you've gotten some feedback that's positive of how that has helped somebody. What does that mean to you when you're just putting your thoughts out there, but yet you see where it's having an impact on somebody?
It it's really sometimes I don't have the words for it
Mhm,
because that's what it's there for is when you get something like that and somebody says that's just what I needed to hear for that day, and it's like that's if it's only one person, that's what it's there for. It's pretty surreal. It's just humbled. I'm humbled and I'm blessed by it.
mhm.
And it also gives you the encouragement to keep it going.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's why, and also it's helped me grow, and
Mhm,
it's helped me to, at first it was kind of me just sharing a little bit of the journey from like 4 years ago, just to get it kind of built up. But so I was being a little bit more transparent, but it's also shown me to come out and be as transparent as God wants me to be to a certain point.
mhm,
And that has helped me be able to talk about it
mhm.
because 4 years ago, I wouldn't be doing something like this, to be interviewed. And it's like, I wouldn't have even considered it. But, you know, God just brings you through those things. But it's just knowing that somebody was affected by it, that it just humbles me so much. It brings me to my knees, honestly.
Yeah, because and I think like we talked about before, just being more of a numbers person, and now God's moving you into this area. I say God does that a lot of times because we have to give him the glory, because
Mhm.
that's not natural to us. And we have to depend on him to give us the words to say, the words to write, the lyrics to put to music. And so all the glory goes back to him
Oh,
because,
yes.
it's totally outside of what we feel like was who we are. But
Hmm.
I think if you're like me, you probably can look back over your life and see his fingerprints leading you and directing you to this point. Like you probably can go back and look and see these little things interwoven in your life and that you would have never thought would have brought you to here. But it was a stepping stone for you.
Yeah, definitely, especially writing this, the coaching program. In fact, I just started writing a little bit before we got on tonight. And it's like, I actually pulled that evangelism explosion. I still had the, book, and as actually I'm pulling what I went through and learned then
Mhm.
as 20, maybe 30 years ago, and I am bringing that forward. And it's like, and there, and it's just like, it's just kind of amazing
Mhm.
things I never did think about,
Yeah.
but there was a reason to keep it. And
Right, right. And there was a reason God took you through those
yeah,
30 years ago,
and
laid
I
that
will
foundation.
and I will tell you this another thing with the blog, when somebody just leaves you a comment like that, I never could take a compliment or something very well
Mhm.
because it was just the but that has, basically, if you don't say something, they want you to know, and
Mhm.
God wants you to know. So it has humbled me where I can accept that so much better now. And I'm just humbly, give him the glory, of course, but I can actually say thank you now and
Mhm.
be at peace about it because I didn't used to, because
Yeah.
I didn't think I deserved it.
Yeah. And that's a growth process,
It is.
just really walking through that. So I'm so thankful that you have walked through that,
Yeah.
and accept that praise, other people, giving you that honor that is due you. But then you shining it back on God, that's
Yeah, because that's exactly what Paul did. He would he wasn't boasting about him, but he was boasting about God working through him in his weakness and giving glory to God.
yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad of that. Now, the exciting thing that's coming up is that you have a brand new book that has been released and available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So it is titled Where Faith Takes Flight.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what that's been like and give us a little insight into that book.
Well, these are all they're poems, they're inspirational, faith-based poems. Um, that again, the poetry started with the Time Has Come community with an
Mhm.
August writing challenge a couple of years ago. And I just started writing them, and I just started writing them. And I would also include them in with some, like, when I would, a lot of times now when I write on the blog, I'll include that, but then I'll include always scripture or a song that I feel like, of course, I couldn't put music in the book, um, but where faith takes flight, that came from lately. I have, when I'm going out and doing a nature walk, because I love to be out in nature, something about the birds. And if you think about the birds, doesn't matter which one, if they're a pigeon, whatever, um, they actually have to depend on God for everything to supply the food. They're just vulnerable. They're totally vulnerable to nature's elements,
Mhm.
which is the way we should live our life. Be
Mhm.
totally surrendering our lives to God in every aspect. And that aspect is what a lot of us there's part of it we don't want to hold on to. So that concept with the birds, how their faith in God just takes flight as they fly. I was kind of bringing that into the book.
Mhm.
And so if we picture ourselves like the birds, our faith will take flight like that, and God will use us as we as we if we surrender our total selves to Him and submit in humble obedience to Him. So that's what I kind of did. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like if I go on a nature walk, I would just take if there was one of the ducks, in the pond or something, I would just take my camera on the phone, take a picture. Or if I was at the beach, the one that's on the cover of the book,
Mhm.
um, I was at Emerald Isle one weekend, long weekend, and it was on the sound side, and so there were people fishing. So the birds were really flying around because it's like food. So I just would take the phone and just take so many pictures of the birds, and that the title and everything just kind of came together.
Mhm.
And in the book, there's 3 sections, and I kind of gear it towards the coaching.
Mhm.
If we keep a grateful heart, gratitude in our heart, then that's where our focus is going to be. And that's going to lead to a healthy mindset, which is the second part of the book section. And that healthy mindset will let us be able to hear the Holy Spirit's voice and guide us to making the best faith-based decisions that we can make.
Yeah.
So it goes from gratitude to mindset to guidance.
Mhm.
And then there's poems in between, but every poem does have a picture,
Mhm.
um, whether it's on nature or not. They're all taken by me over the years. And it was important for me because to include a picture with every poem so you can kind of see maybe a thought process where I was coming from with it, or God was leading me to do. But it was like most of these poems I had written previously on the blog, but my coach, Francine Ivy, she is the one who encouraged me, and you need to bring those poems into your book
Mhm.
and self-publish it.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, I prayed about it, and I think she was right,
Mhm.
because it's another way of getting this out into somebody's hands without always just going up on the blog and turning on a computer or your phone. I
Yeah.
mean, if they wanted something tangible, you
Yeah.
know, and it's been a labor of love to create. Luckily, it was not very hard since I'd already written most all of them. It was just trying to choose the photographs because I changed some of them up from when I originally published them on the Substack.
Mhm.
But it was a labor of love to create. I learned a lot through the process, and my coach helped me make sure to get it up on KDP
Mhm.
correctly, the self-publishing.
Mhm.
And it was just released Tuesday of this
Yeah.
week. And so this is it once again. And then you can see there's
Oh yeah.
photographs on everyone, but there, and
Mhm.
on some of the photographs, I did include scripture because I
Mhm.
think that was very important to, but all the photographs were mine, but that bird and then in the flight, it just, for some reason, there was it just kind of came together. God said, use that, and where faith takes flight.
Yeah. I love that. And it reminds me of Isaiah 40:31. They that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will
Yep.
mount up as with wings as eagles.
And
And
actually, yeah, that is my verse.
yeah.
And it's the last one also in the book, except for Matthew 6:33 and 34, where it talks about seek first
Yeah.
his kingdom,
Mhm.
righteousness, and then your worries are for tomorrow. Just, your troubles are enough just for today, to paraphrase it. Because that's one of Matthew 6:33 is one of them I tend to use very dominantly within the coaching
Mhm.
platform. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
but that's kind of where Isaiah 40:31 was, I think someone said, if there is a verse that you need to go back to
Mhm.
because we need to take every thought captive, not
Right.
just the good or the bad.
Mhm.
And I would always just go back to gravitate towards that verse.
Yeah.
So that's always been my go-to verse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And I'm super excited for you. I know you have a lot of good things coming up, and I look forward to watching how everything grows and goes. But just super excited that to have you on and just to hear from you. You have such an amazing story to tell, and I know that many people are going to be blessed just by your story and by these poems. I can't wait to get my copy of your book so that I can sit down with it. So what does your poems, do they have titles, or
Yep, each one of them has a title.
what's
Um,
your favorite one? If you had to pick one, what would be your favorite?
Actually, I don't know if they're all favorites, but I guess I guess it would almost be, there is one called One Day at a Time because that's what the blog is.
Uh-huh.
And it would either be that one or probably, and the last one is called Where Faith Takes Wings.
Hmm.
Probably those two.
Hmm.
Um, just because One Day at a Time is almost not one of the very first ones I wrote, but just because that ended up being the name of the blog.
Yeah.
And I guess, and then the last one, because that one is where I quoted Isaiah 40:31,
Yeah.
and that's actually the last one of the book.
Okay.
I think the ones on guidance are almost some of my favorites.
Hmm.
Mindset, just because that's where you almost have to walk through that muddy, messy process.
Yeah.
But you do that so you can come home to where you need to be.
Yeah.
And the first part, gratitude is also getting a little bit easier to write
Mhm.
because that's where we need it. But the promise keeper is another good one, and then being forever grateful and keep pressing on. It's just like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. It's like they're all special for different reasons.
right. Yeah, it's hard to put a favorite one
Mhm.
because they've all been a labor of love
Yeah.
to write.
Yeah.
And I've learned through each one of them. Your
Right.
writing gets better as you go through because it was a little muddy at first, but and I'm a rhymer. I don't know why, but I'm a rhymer. Not every one of line does,
Mhm.
but for some reason I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, God's given you that gift, so it's good, and just super excited, and just really enjoyed our time tonight. Thank you so much for sharing with us and sharing your story, and I just believe that this is just the beginning of great things ahead. Um,
Well, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed it. I appreciate it so much. And I have a feeling good things are ahead for both of us.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that too. So I always have three questions I like to ask my podcast guests, and you've actually answered one of them already. One of them is, what is your absolute favorite scripture that if you could only have one, that's the one you would take? So I'm guessing it'd be Isaiah 40:31.
Yeah, I would say that one because it's up on my refrigerator.
Mm-hmm. All right, good. And the second question is, um, if you could go anywhere in the world, what would your dream vacation be?
Actually, I think back back to where I went in 2012, and that is back to Alaska.
Mm.
It was and I say that because it was so eerily beautiful. It's the last frontier,
Mhm.
and I almost think, well, is that the last frontier before my eternal destiny? I think about it in maybe in that terms. Can't say that I thought about it then, but that just kind of popped into my head just now. But going through going through the Glacier Bay National Park, when it is so there's nothing but silence, and the water is just so calm.
Mm.
And then you're just you're out there, and you hear the guide through the speakers talk about, and that's what you really hear, and it's an echo effect.
Mm.
But to experience that eeriness, and there's not a lot of color, but at the same time, it's just one of the natural wonders of God's creation to see those glaciers. And I actually saw one that actually they call it calving, where the ice drops off into the water.
Oh, wow.
And you to hear that ice splash,
Mhm.
and there's an echo effect. And it's like, and even birds can even live in that area. So we saw a couple of them, pigeon, whatever they call them.
Mhm.
But it was different,
Mhm.
but I kind of want to go back because it's an area that there's some things I didn't get to see,
Mhm.
you were limited, for the time, but maybe one of these days if God calls me back,
Yeah, that's
but
awesome. Yeah, I've always wanted to go to Alaska as well. I did have the opportunity one time, um, but I wound up having to cancel my trip because I was working, and I was working
Mm.
a hard deadline, and so I was like, "There's absolutely no way that I can make this deadline and go on this vacation." But one day I'm going to get back there. But
There you go.
well, and the next question is, are you a coffee drinker, a tea drinker, or neither?
I am definitely a coffee drinker in the morning, and I do drink not hot tea, but I will drink unsweet tea.
Okay. How do you like your coffee?
Straight up.
Straight up black?
Yep.
All right. All right.
Yeah. I didn't even like coffee till later on in life, but I'll have it every morning, and that's just about it. But I'm not a flavor person. For some reason, about 10 years ago,
Mhm.
I stopped drinking sweet tea, and
Mhm.
and when I drank coffee, I just wanted it something about the bitter taste. I lost
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sweet tooth of that.
I gotcha. Well, good. Well, yeah, I like my coffee. So I do use a little half and half most of the time, but that's about it. I can drink it black if it's like really good coffee.
Mhm.
If it's really bitter, I might have to add a little something to it. Now I do drink unsweet tea, so we're on
Okay.
the same page with that. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Hope, Health, and Healing. I know that Anne's story has inspired you and encouraged you and really even challenged you to take a few moments to sit with yourself, to look deep inside and see if there are things that are holding you back that God may want you to surrender to Him. Look in the show notes for a link to her website where you can also sign up for her blog, a link to her new book on Amazon. Be sure to get your own copy, and also how to follow her on social media. Thank you again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you on episode 8.